On Friday, the 22nd of August, just last month, a 19-year-old girl named Dacara Thompson left her father's home at around 10 PM, telling him she was just stepping out to get some gas and would be right back, but that would be the last time her family would ever see her. Later that night, Dacara's SUV was discovered abandoned on Jasmine Terrace, parked in front of a fire hydrant, and inside the vehicle was her purse with about $60 in cash, meaning she had left with only her cell phone and her key fob. So, after being reported missing by her family, the Prince George's County Police began investigating her disappearance, which eventually led them to uncover some surveillance footage from around 1:30 AM, which showed a young woman believed to be Dacara stepping out of her vehicle, locking it and slowly walking away toward Riggs Road. But to make matters even more troubling, it was also discovered that her cell phone had been disabled shortly after that time, and there was also no activity on her bank accounts or social media, alluding to the fact that she could have been in serious danger. However, any hope that still remained would soon turn to heartbreak, as just 8 days on from her disappearance, the police would discover the lifeless body of a 19-year-old woman, which after examination was later confirmed to belong to Dacara. During a press conference, police would reveal that they had a person of interest named Hugo Hernandez-Mendez, who was subsequently charged for his involvement in the case, but investigations are still underway to uncover the truth. So, given this heartbreaking update to the case, it is no wonder that her family have been left devastated as they wait for further updates from the police, so they can finally understand what really happened to Dacara Thompson. Dacara Rose Thompson was born in the mid-2000s to her loving parents Daniel and Carmen Thompson in the state of Maryland, where she would grow up surrounded by 4 older siblings who looked out for her, whilst also allowing her to carve out her own unique personality within the household. Family members describe her as a spirited and determined young woman who, despite her tendency to be relatively introverted, still cared deeply about those closest to her and often brought a sense of energy and brightness into their lives. By all accounts, Dacara's parents were deeply involved in her upbringing, and as she grew into her teenage years, their bond only strengthened. Carmen has spoken openly about her daughter's ambitions, revealing that Dacara had plans to join the Air Force after high school, and this aspiration reflected not only her drive and discipline, but also a desire to serve and create a meaningful future for herself. To her family, these plans symbolized her determination to set a strong foundation for adulthood, while also showing her seriousness about carving her own path. And so, by the summer of 2025, Dacara was continuing to pursue this dream as a now 19-year-old who was living with her father in Lanham, Maryland. She had reached a pivotal moment in her life, one where she was on the edge of independence, yet still firmly rooted in the support of her family. Those who knew her best say she balanced youthful ambition with a sense of responsibility, keeping close contact with her parents and siblings while also thinking ahead to what her next chapter might look like. Although much of her personal life, including details about her schooling, friendships, or work, has not been shared publicly, the image that emerges of what we do know is of a young woman in transition, stepping into adulthood, filled with plans and potential, and surrounded by people who loved her deeply. However, that bright future would come to a sudden and tragic halt, when, for reasons unknown, Dacara would mysteriously disappear on that fateful night in August. On Friday, the 22nd of August, the teenager left her father's home at around 10 PM after announcing that she would be stepping out for a brief period of time. Her exact plans that night are still unknown, but what we do know is that a short time later, she would send her father a text message explaining that she had purchased some gas for her car and would be returning home soon. However, little did her family know that this would be the final message Dacara would ever send. As the hours continued to pass by, with Dacara failing to return home as promised, her father began calling her cell phone, only for the calls to go unanswered. He followed up with text messages of his own, but those too went without a reply. At first, he assumed she had been delayed or distracted, but as the night wore on with no word, his concern began to grow. By the following morning, his worry deepened when Dacara's mother, Carmen, used a phone tracking feature to try and locate her daughter. The search led to a troubling discovery. Dacara's SUV, a 2013 pearl white Ford Edge, was sitting abandoned on Jasmine Terrace in Langley Park, just off of Riggs Road, several miles from her father's home. Inside the vehicle were many of her personal belongings, including her purse and about $60 in cash. But to make matters worse, her cell phone, which was showing as active just a few hours earlier, was now disconnected, which, as you can imagine, immediately raised red flags. So, as the hours eventually turned into days, with still no sign of Dacara, the Thompson family realized that the situation could be far worse than they had first thought. So, as their fears continued to grow, they made the agonizing decision to contact the local police to officially report their 19-year-old daughter as missing. On Saturday, the 23rd of August, the Prince George's County Police Department would receive a phone call from a family who were desperate to find their missing loved one who had disappeared just the night before. From the very beginning, investigators agreed to take the case seriously as they began gathering information from both parents. During these discussions, it was revealed that Dacara had sent her final text message at 11:58 PM the night before, where she explained how she had got gas for the car and was heading back soon. So, in response to learning this information, the police then began the painstaking process of reconstructing her final hours. The abandoned SUV became a central focus, and officers combed through the area surrounding Jasmine Terrace and Riggs Road looking for any overlooked clues. However, to Carmen and Daniel's surprise, rather than sealing off the car as a crime scene and conducting a thorough inspection of the vehicle, the police instead instructed the family to drive the car back home, as they said it would get towed away if left unattended. So, against his better judgment, but doing as he was told, Daniel then drove the vehicle back to his home, potentially contaminating any evidence in the process. Detectives then reached out to local businesses, canvassed nearby neighbourhoods, and spoke with residents in Langley Park, hoping someone had seen or heard something in those early morning hours. They also monitored her financial accounts, phone records, and social media activity, all of which showed a sudden and complete silence after the night she vanished. And for someone of her age, this absence of a digital footprint was especially alarming. Meanwhile, her family and community began organising vigils and search efforts, gathering at the very location where her SUV had been found. Flyers were distributed, prayers were said, and loved ones pleaded for anyone with information to come forward. To those who knew her, it seemed impossible that Dacara would simply walk away from her life without explanation. But as the days continued to pass by, frustration mounted. Investigators continued their work, but leads were scarce. Publicly, the police department offered few details, careful not to compromise the investigation. Privately though, family members began to fear the worst, struggling with the uncertainty of not knowing where their daughter was, or what had happened to her after she left that car. By late August, the silence surrounding the case was becoming unbearable. There were still no confirmed sightings of Dacara and no activity on her account, so for investigators, the lack of evidence only deepened the mystery, forcing them to consider chilling possibilities. However, just as hope began to waver, a new development would soon come to light that promised to reshape the timeline of events and raise even more questions about what really happened to Dacara Thompson that night. On Monday, the 25th of August, just 3 days after Dacara had last been seen, her case began to draw wider attention as Prince George's County Police confirmed an important update to the public. Investigators revealed that they had recovered some surveillance footage from a resident of Langley Park who had captured a young woman matching Dacara's description exiting her pearl white Ford Edge at around 1:30 AM on the morning of August 23rd. The footage showed her calmly locking the SUV before walking towards Riggs Road, alone and on foot. While there were no obvious signs of distress, the image of her disappearing into the darkness would quickly become one of the most haunting details of the case. It was the last known sighting of the 19-year-old, and it added a layer of urgency to the search. By the following week, her family's pleas reached the broader community, as local news outlets began to cover the story, showing Dacara's mother, Carmen, tearfully urging anyone with information to come forward. She emphasized how deeply out of character her daughter's disappearance was, describing Dacara as dependable and communicative, someone who would never simply vanish without a word. The coverage also revealed the disturbing circumstances surrounding her abandoned SUV. Not only had Dacara left behind her purse, but they were also able to confirm that her cell phone had stopped working that very same night, cutting off all possible contact. These troubling details suggested that something had gone seriously wrong, and they cast further doubt on any possibility that her absence was voluntary. But as the days passed, the story of her disappearance spread far beyond Prince George's County. Social media posts carried her photo across the region, and vigils were held in her honour with friends, neighbours and strangers alike, joining with her family in their calls for answers, determined not to let her case fade from public attention. In the meantime, the police continued their investigation, following up on leads, re-interviewing those close to her, and expanding their search efforts across nearby neighbourhoods. However, despite the mounting pressure and growing public awareness, no new evidence would surface to explain where Dacara had gone after she stepped away from her car that night. However, just as the community began to worry that her case was turning cold, there would be one last twist to the tale that would dramatically change the tone of her story. On Sunday, the 31st of August, a major development would shake the investigation when authorities discovered the body of a young woman off the eastbound lanes of Route 50 in Anne Arundel County. The recovery was made by Maryland State Police troopers who had been dispatched to the area following a call about a disabled vehicle. However, upon arriving, they would uncover something far more troubling. An unresponsive female lying in the grassy area just beyond the highway. In the hours that followed, investigators quickly confirmed that the discovery was being examined in direct connection with the disappearance of 19-year-old Dacara Thompson. But while the process of formal identification was still underway at the time, the proximity of the find and the circumstances surrounding it immediately cast a heavy shadow over the case. What made the development even more significant was the confirmation from detectives that the body had not simply been abandoned there at random. Instead, they now believed that Dacara had entered the vehicle of a 35-year-old man named Hugo Rene Hernandez-Mendez in the early hours of August 23rd, only a short distance from where her own car was later found in Hyattsville. Using surveillance footage and investigative leads, officers tracked Hernandez's movements back to his home on Kimber Ridge Drive in Bowie. According to the police, it was here that the crime is believed to have occurred, in his very own bedroom, before the body was ultimately transported to the remote location off Route 50. Search warrants executed days later would provide investigators with enough evidence to pursue murder charges against Hugo, which was officially announced on the 5th of September. So, as you can imagine, the news has been devastating for Dacara's loved ones, as well as the wider community, as up until this moment there had remained a fragile hope that she might somehow return home safely, especially since her vehicle was discovered with no immediate signs of a struggle. However, now with the recovery of her remains and the chilling details surrounding her last known movements, that hope has been met with the crushing weight of reality. Community members have responded with an outpouring of grief, expressing sorrow and solidarity online, while also demanding answers as to how such a tragedy could have occurred. And though charges have been brought, investigators emphasize that much work still lies ahead as they piece together the full truth of what happened to Dacara. So, while this discovery has provided a grim but crucial breakthrough, it does not erase the many questions that still remain unanswered. Why did she enter Hernandez's vehicle? What exactly transpired inside his home? And could there be more to the story than what is currently known? But for now, her family continues to endure the unimaginable pain of loss, even as they stand determined in their pursuit of justice for their daughter. And though the community has rallied behind them, the haunting reality lingers on, that a young woman full of promise and devoted to serving others had her life cut short in the most tragic of circumstances. Now, unfortunately, as far as the official investigation goes, this is all we know for now. But I can only hope that in time the full truth will come to light, and that Dacara's family will be given the answers and closure they so desperately deserve. When I first began working on this video, Dacara was still considered a missing person, and like so many others, I was holding on to the hope that she would be found safe. So, when the heartbreaking news broke that her remains had been discovered, it hit me hard. After spending hours learning about her life and the love she shared with her family, it's impossible not to feel devastated by her loss. So I can only imagine the pain her family and friends are experiencing right now, as for them this is not just a story, it's their life, which will now be forever changed. Now if you're familiar with my channel, then you'll know that usually at this point in the video I would share some of the theories that have been raised about what could have happened, but given how recent this development is, and out of respect for Dacara's loved ones, I will refrain from any speculation here. Instead, I think it's important to take this moment to reflect on and celebrate the young woman she was, a daughter, a sister, a friend, and someone who dedicated her time to serving others in her community. But still, it's crucial that we continue sharing her story, ensuring that the police investigate every possible lead and that her case receives the attention it deserves, not only for Dacara, but for every other family that is enduring this kind of unimaginable loss. So, with that in mind, please share this story with as many people as you can, because without the continued support of this community, there is always the risk that cases like Dacara's might just fade from the headlines, and I feel that is something we simply cannot allow to happen. But with this thought in mind, I also wanted to take this opportunity to raise the profile of another case that occurred in Prince George's County just a few years ago. Because just like Dacara, they too were a young black woman with their whole lives ahead of them before they would mysteriously disappear. However, unlike Dacara's story, they still remain missing to this day, with the investigations surrounding their case sitting cold as their families continue to wait for justice. But before I dive into the similarities, for those of you who are not familiar with Janiyah's case, I'll just provide a brief overview of the key details to give you some context. So, on Monday the 24th of April in 2023, an 18-year-old student named Janiyah Thompson was witnessed walking away from her high school after she had explained to her older brother how she was leaving early to take care of something. However, to this day, she has still not been seen or heard from since. Later that day, Janiyah was then captured by security cameras at the Naylor Road metro station in Temple Hills, Maryland. But it is unknown if she was able to board a train or who she was with at the time. So after her family started to notice her absence, they reported her missing to the Prince George's County Police Department with the hope that they would be able to find her. But despite their desperate pleas for help, the police explained that due to Janiyah's age at the time of her disappearance, she was technically an adult and therefore free to run away if she wanted to. So, with little help from the authorities, Janiyah's family then turned to the media in an attempt to raise some more awareness of the case by informing the public about her disappearance themselves. However, after 2 years of searching, the now 21-year-old is still nowhere to be seen, as her family are still waiting for any official conclusions from law enforcement about what truly happened that night. But one thing that is for certain is that when you compare this case to Dacara's, the situation feels hauntingly familiar, as there are some glaring similarities that, in my opinion, are certainly worth exploring. Firstly, both Dacara and Janiyah were young black women, 19 and 18 years old respectively, at the time of their disappearances. Both were deeply connected to their families, with strong support systems that relied on consistent communication. Neither had any history of disappearing or cutting off contact, which makes their sudden vanishings all the more alarming. And while the circumstances differ in some ways, there are several striking parallels that cannot be ignored. For one, both young women disappeared from Prince George's County, Maryland, within about 2 years of each other. Janiyah in April 2023 and Dacara in August of 2025. Both were last seen in public areas after being captured on surveillance cameras, Janiyah near the Naylor Road metro station in Temple Hills, and Dacara leaving her SUV in Hyattsville. In each instance, their last known movements were captured or tracked to some extent, but after that, the trail went cold almost immediately. The nature of their disappearances also shares similarities. Both cases involved sudden vanishings without any signs of voluntary departure. Dacara messaged her father to say that she would be home soon, while Janiyah left abruptly after telling her family member she was going to take care of something. In both cases, the suddenness of their disappearance made it clear to their families that something was seriously wrong. Concerns have also been raised regarding how these cases were handled by law enforcement in the critical early days. Both families have publicly stated the emotional strain of waiting for updates, describing slow-moving investigations and limited information about the progress being made. And despite the families' pleas, concrete leads have been scarce, leaving both communities on edge. Another link between the cases lies in the broader social context, as both Dacara and Janiyah's families have faced challenges in maintaining public attention for their cases, reflecting a troubling pattern seen in many missing person investigations involving young black women. The disparity in media coverage and investigative transparency has compounded the uncertainty, highlighting systematic issues that families often have to navigate while desperately searching for answers. Even their shared surname, Thompson, adds an eerie layer of similarity, and when placed side by side, their cases point to the concerning reality of young black women disappearing under mysterious circumstances, with families often left to contend with limited information and the emotional burden of waiting for answers that may never come. Behind both Dacara and Janiyah are families who are grieving and tirelessly searching for their loved ones, so I feel strongly that these stories must be highlighted and remembered to ensure that answers are provided and justice is eventually served. Anyway, on that note, I think I'll leave this video here. But as always, please leave your thoughts and condolences in the comments down below, as I'm sure their families would appreciate the support. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for updates on these stories. Also, if you found this video informative, feel free to check out the playlist on screen now, which covers the many other cases of young black women who continue to remain missing to this day.